What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping back in with some Destiny 2 news, updates, and roundups as things ramp back up just a little bit in the game. Of course, one of the main things ramping up recently have been more busted exotics, glitches, and things like that, so yet another exotic gets a temporary ban as Bungie disable Winter's Guile. We'll talk about what's going on with that. On top of this, Wishender is going to be fixed shortly, and we have a few more details about the January hotfix, incoming rare bounty changes, as well as additional changes coming to the game soon. And so we'll talk about that, but also we're going to round up some new interviews about D2, future content, some seasonal events, and folks are even speculating about the possibility of Destiny as a TV series, and that's certainly an interesting conversation. So we'll round up all of the coverage for today, guys. And if you do enjoy the video, then feel free to get subscribed for all the D2 news and coverage, but otherwise, let's get it going. Initially, earlier on this week, Bungie disabled the Wormgod's Caress due to an exploit that allows it to retain stacks of bonus damage indefinitely, or near enough indefinitely. However, Winter's Guile for the Warlocks was essentially doing the exact same thing, so Bungie Help tweeted, due to an issue with the Winter's Guile exotic gauntlets, where Warlord's Sigil perk retains its increased melee damage, after its intended timer cooldown, the Armor 1.0 and 2.0 versions have been disabled until a fix can be deployed at a later date. So this time they disabled the Year 1 and Year 3 versions of the gauntlets, because last time with Wormgods, the Year 1 version was still available. And basically, players have been able to stack the 5 melee kills to increase melee damage to the maximum, then go into the menu, switch gauntlets very briefly, and switch back and then retain that perk indefinitely. And so for the moment, that's another exotic that we're not going to be able to equip. Some of you guys may have seen some of the crazy stuff that folks have been doing with this, and also the fact that recently, players have discovered that you can stack 1-2 punch on shotguns. And I believe Esoteric was the first person to post a video doing this, but basically you get the 5 stacks of damage with the gauntlets, and then if you have 2 1-2 punch shotguns equipped, one in the kinetic and one in the energy slot, you can basically fire a round from each of them at the target, and then it stacks up for 2 times 1-2 punch melee. So pretty crazy stuff, and the glitch with 1-2 punch is actually still in the game, so maybe something to play around with. Up next though, on Tuesday, we're going to be getting D2's first hotfix of the year, and Bungie told us specifically that they would be fixing the issue with the European Dead Zone obelisk, as well as the Eververse notification that's driving us all wild. However, at the same time, they did suggest that we would see some other changes, and one of them includes the Wishender. So, of course, since Season of Dawn, Wishender has been bugged and doing unintentional amounts of damage, and unfortunately for the weapon and us, it is one that's going to be fixed on Tuesday. So, DMG said this will be fixed in next week's update. I fully understand that this will bring some negative feelings to players as they enjoyed the unintentional increase in damage, and we've brought this feedback to the team, which could be considered for future updates when looking at bows overall. He does point out that that isn't a promise, but it is something they're aware of, so let me know how you guys feel about it. And despite the fact that Bungie will be fixing it next week, I personally would love to see Bungie amp up the damage of bows in PvE. And the bug with Wishender really has just highlighted how much better bows could potentially feel. Obviously with a little bit of balancing, but yeah, either way, let us know what you think. And once again, the hotfix drops Tuesday alongside the weekly reset for the game. Another problem that Bungie are looking to fix is the Green with Envy quest issue, and that's one that they've said won't be sorted in next week's hotfix, but at a later date in the month. So hold tight and hopefully that one will be sorted soon. And it's looking like a later January update will maybe be a little bit more substantial and could also feature a change to rare Black Armory bounties. So a player posted essentially complaining about how long it took them to get the rare Black Armory bounty for the Izanagi's Burden quest. And Cosmo said, we've been working on a change to make getting the rare bounties a bit less of a pain, which is currently planned for an update coming later this month. So hopefully quality of life for Izanagi's Burden and other Black Armory content will improve. Bungie have also responded to feedback about bounty grind and some of the objectives, also things like the Final Blow objectives, so you never know, we could see some further updates to those as well. But if we had to take a guess at when the next update in January actually drops, it seems pretty possible that it'll be on January 28th when we get the Bastion quest. Bungie probably have to also load data into the game for the Empyrean Foundation, Crimson Days and all of that kind of stuff, so it's likely that that will be part of that update. And if you're wondering about the Empyrean Foundation, as we've discussed, it does look like some kind of event where we donate our Season of Dawn currency in order to restore it. There are a series of different quests associated with it, and exotic items which actually help us level up obelisks, but the curious thing is that it seems intrinsically linked to Season of Dawn, since it requires the fractaline currency, amongst other things, but at the same time, it's also the free-to-play friendly event, or one which actually features content for all players of the game, so that's really interesting, and given Bungie's tendency to release an exotic quest for all players each season, maybe Empyrean Foundation will actually have an exotic hidden within that is the kind of free exotic for the season, but Either way, it's definitely unusual to have DLC content and free-to-play content combined somehow, but it looks like that's what's going to happen. If you do want more info about the Empyrean Foundation, then I'll link my most recent video on it down below, as that is a pretty thorough breakdown of what we know so far. For some other updates though, Cosmo did confirm a small change to player resilience after a player suspected as much, so someone pointed out that you can't survive 2 crit and 1 body against a Thorn anymore if you have tier 5 resilience. They point out that this wasn't mentioned in the patch notes, and so Cosmo responded, I spoke with the team, and it looks like this was a side effect of the changes to make resilience affect class ability cooldowns, and resulted in a 0.5 difference in vitality for tiers 4 to 9. I'm told that Thorn should have always required 6 resilience to survive 2 headshots and 1 body shot, and we currently don't have plans to change resilience back to how it was before, so that's pretty interesting, and Bungie are saying it's very much intentional, but for any folks who are curious if resilience had technically changed, then yes, there was in fact a pretty small adjustment to resilience, which Bungie didn't point out in patch notes or anything like that. Bungie are also working on a fix to long-standing problems with the Sunbreaker, so some pranks a lot on Reddit pointed out that the bottom tree Sunbreaker melee ability in D2, which is called Mortar Blast, and was also a perk in D1 called Thermal Vents, has a pretty significant bug. When using the charge melee, you'll often actually see 0 damage. This is something that's persisted between D1 and D2, and DMG said, looks like the team has been investigating for a bit, and they're planning to address this in a future hotfix. I don't have specific details on the changes they're developing or when exactly to expect them, but when that does come into the game, they'll be sure to cover it in a patch note preview. So if that's something you've been kind of aware of, then it's one Bungie are looking into fixing at the moment. Otherwise, on the point of feedback, Bungie have recently responded about activities offering larger amounts of XP, such as pinnacle raids and things like that. And the original quote was something along the lines of, why can't raids reward more than 2 bounties worth of XP? And Cosmo said, now that we're in the 2nd season, where XP has been made much more important with the season pass, we're gathering feedback from the community on improving how XP is earned. The majority of feedback I'm seeing from players is to increase the amount of XP being given by activities, so there is not as much emphasis on always concentrating on completing bounties. And this has come up a few different times, and is one that Bungie are saying they're persistently pushing, so especially when it comes to raids, things like Nightfalls or Deal Nightfalls, maybe we could see a more significant jump in XP that we actually earn, but at the same time, players and Bungie do point out that they have to be careful with match-made activities like the Crucible, or any game modes that you could complete relatively quickly, especially because of the risk of players AFK farming things in order to earn XP instead of using bounties. So by the looks of things, it is one that Bungie are really thinking about, but be sure to give me your thoughts down below. One reminder of a couple of possible future changes would include a likely update to the screen shake that you get from the Hardlight. DMG did mention this just after the start of this season, and he said that they're also looking to update Warlock melee speed in a future season. So while we're on the subject of all of these different changes, it is worth mentioning these few that could be a little further out. Now let's move on to a few interview segments with Bungie. So recently, we spoke about Bungie's tease about the future of the Darkness story, the pyramids, and the doppelganger cutscene from the post-Shadowkeep campaign, and they did state that they've been kind of laying the foundation for the future of the story, and that we are very much going to see the Darkness, the pyramids, and some kind of conclusion or continuation of that story in the future. So obviously that's pretty exciting, and presumably the content we're getting in Year 3 is going to directly tie and kind of lead into that. However, also, interviewers did press a question about the idea of a Destiny TV series, so they talk about the recent Witcher series on Netflix, and Bungie's own original Halo, as well as The Division, which has a film in the works at the minute. So Robbie Stevens did reply and said, anything is possible. One of the advantages of Bungie fully owning the Destiny IP is that we have the freedom to make those choices whenever we think the time is right, and that's all I can say about it. And so I don't think it necessarily means that they're working on anything at the moment, but it is very true, and of course in terms of story, Destiny is extremely rich and there is a lot of stuff that they could potentially work with. So let me know how you interpret that statement, and if you want to read through any of those interviews, I will link them down below. Before we get on to any other updates and feedback, some players were asking, is there any chance that we could get some thoughts from the Crucible team at Bungie in one of the upcoming Bungie updates? And obviously there has been a lot of conversation about the quality of life of PvP, the meaning for PvP in the endgame, and so I think PvP players especially have got a lot of really valid feedback that they can just kind of fly off at Bungie straight away, right? And DMG does say though, what would you specifically like to see? Before we get ahead of ourselves, this isn't a promise for a Crucible section in the next TWAB, it's another way of me asking for feedback. And again, on the subject of Crucible, I'd really be curious to hear your thoughts. Of course, one of the moves that Bungie have been pushing is banning cheaters in the game, and that has been probably more prevalent over the past few months than it was historically. And so they will be paying more attention to cheating, reports, and actually investigating them. And once again, with the increased likelihood that players will actually get bans, Bungie do point out that there is now a ban or restriction appeal form, so if you find yourself needing that, the link will be down below. The team are also investigating performance issues, specifically in the UI, going through character menus, the mod menus. And so if you're still being impacted by that stuff, it's worth bearing in mind that Bungie are still paying attention to it. But for today, guys, that's the roundup, so bit of a mixed bag of changes coming up very shortly, and stuff that Bungie are working on for further down the road. When we get the juicy content like quests, new exotics, the Foundation, I will be sure to keep you posted about it, so if you are new to the channel, be sure to get subscribed if you do enjoy the content, and you can also turn on notifications so you don't miss out on anything. If you've enjoyed this video, a rating is very much appreciated down below. Otherwise, feel free to give us your thoughts on anything we've covered. that we've covered in the video. And for now, thank you as always for tuning in, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.